So I got to tell you, first, we have a special guest this week, and the first time I talked to our guest, Cary Walkin, gosh, I want to say it was a year or so ago, maybe a little bit longer. Whenever Cary came out with a game, and I want to say this game was, gosh, a year and a half, almost 2 years old now. And this is a game called Arena.XLSM, if you haven't heard of it. So that Cary created while he was going to school, while he was getting his MBA. So Cary's a certified CPA. Cary, how are you doing? And would you mind telling us the story a little bit of how did this game come about? What is the story of this?
For sure. So basically I was creating the game as a learning tool for while I was taking an Excel course. And you can actually tell very, very simply the mechanics in the game match the timing of when I was actually learning things in the course. So for example, I think the first lessons that we did was simply kind of like a Hello World application where you simply click a button and then the text Hello World appears. So from that lesson, I was like, okay, well, instead of Hello World appearing, why not a smiley face appears when I click this button? And that's how the player is first introduced into the game. And then I realized, okay, well, let's expand on that knowledge set that I now have. What if I added another button and simply moved the smiley face by changing the text? And then I had motion, and that's basically how I created motion in Arena.XLSM. Taking that to the next step was like, okay, well, how do I build some constraints on this motion? And that's how I developed the collision detection, was through a bunch of if functions. And basically just looking at the game as a way to reinforce what I was learning in my Excel course.
So how long did it take you to build this? So here's what I think. I think I was in college for a good 12 years, right? So I was there. I could have done some stuff, right? You'd think, right? I spent enough time there, and I never really did so much. I got pretty good at beer pong, pretty good at quarters. How long did it take you to build this? I mean, from the time you kind of said, wow, I can make an if-then-else statement, and how long did it take before you finally went live with this?
I made the decision to actually make it in October, and then I went live, I believe, in March, so about 5 months or so.
Gotcha. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So basically, the way that it worked was, again, in line with the course that I was doing, which was from September to December. And by December, I basically had a working alpha of the game. And then I spent the next couple of months doing polish and adding additional content, rather than having to add any sort of technical challenges and systems.
Well, what sort of class was this?
This was like a spreadsheet VBA macro class, right? So the things that we were learning in class would be things like how to use macros to automate workflow, things of that nature. I know we like created a simulation for one project, that kind of thing, like a Monte Carlo in Excel.
What do you mean by automate workflow?
So, for example, like using macros is pretty much what it comes down to. So anything that would be a repetitive action, recording the macro and then actually going into VBA to edit the macro. And that's actually what I found was the most helpful when creating a game was, even if my programming knowledge was weak, I could record the macro and get a general idea of how to go about getting started. And then, of course, the Excel community is phenomenal. So anytime I didn't know how to do anything, I simply just Googled it. And usually someone had already done the thing that I was trying to do. In a different context, but yeah.
Cool. So when you started doing this, were you just sort of messing around, you were experimenting, and then over a few iterations you thought, wow, I have a game here. Did you say, you know what, I'm going to go out and make a game? Like, did it evolve? Or you just kept adding things and you saw a game come out?
It definitely is kind of all of the above. When I went to do my MBA, I knew I wanted to get into the games industry. And I knew that the best way to get into the games industry is to make cool games. Now, being a CPA, I felt like it was important for me to use what I knew, which was Excel. So that's how that decision came about. But the actual game itself was not designed to be this big giant game. That was a process of adding on things as I was learning more and more things. At first the game was just a very basic kind of cat and mouse game where I was like programming the AI, and that's all it really did. And then as I learned more and more things, I developed each of these systems in a modular fashion so that I could add them on and create a compelling gameplay experience. And something that was, a little bit more challenging than a cat and mouse game.
So when you when you made your game, did you think that it was going to be as big as it became?
No.
Did you know?
Not.
I mean, were you like finally? I mean, sometimes you make something, you're like, this is going to be big, and rightfully so. And sometimes you do something, and you're just like, I'm going to put it on the web and see who uses it.
I think part of the issue is because I was making it, I didn't realize that it was cool. Like, I don't know if that's something that you've experienced, but it's just like, you're testing something, you're in it, you're spending hours and hours and hours on it. It was just like a pet project, and I only realized that it was cool when I would show it to people and get their reactions. And people were like just genuinely amazed, and that they, I had some people just say like, you have to release this thing now because people need to play this. And that's actually what led me to actually release it rather than just keep it on my hard drive as a pet project.
So I'm curious. Okay, so you mentioned cat and mouse game. What is an example of something that says, it would be cool if, and then you stick it on, and then it becomes another, wow, it would be cool if. That's how I hear the development happening, is that you weren't thinking about 5 pieces at piece 1. They came as you said, wow, this would be cool if I could do it.
Yeah, that's the exact, what you just vocalized is the exact iterative process. So, my first one is, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I had, a guy walking around the screen? Like, that already was what I thought was the cool thing. And then I was like, okay, well, now, wouldn't it be cool if I put a barrier in front of that guy and, like, basically turned it into a sign of, like, a maze type of game, right? So now you can only walk in certain paths, and then that was cool, right? And then I'm like, okay, well, what if I had that guy interact with something, right? And that's how I started developing the AI, so that you could interact with something and get a result every time that you moved in any direction.
Right.
And then I just drew from my own experiences and trying to make the game that I wanted to make. So, wouldn't it be, and again, with the limitations that I have, being I am a terrible artist. So, basically using that design limitation to craft the game to say, okay, what, the focus of this game isn't going to be art. It's going to be the AI. And that's how I decided to have that randomized AI as a core functionality of the game. So that every time you play the game, you get a different experience, and that there's, over 2,000 enemies in the game, and they all feel different. They all play differently.
So you mentioned AI a lot. What is that? And how does that show up in the coding?
So AI is just a fancy way to say giant if statement. And they're basically...
we know that. Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Basically, the code for Arena.XLSM is it waits for input from the user and then triggers a massive if statement. I tried at one point to do a flow chart, and it's just a massive, ugly if statement. And so what the AI does is, for example, there's enemy movement AI. So if the player's at a certain location, the enemy will see, okay, well, what is the most optimal way for me to get to the player, right? To attack the player. There's AI that works in enemy behavior as well. So, for example, some enemies might have a random chance to dodge an attack, or they might have, special attacks. And that, again, is part of the if statements, where it's just like, oh, well, it's a Boolean check. Does the enemy have this ability? If so, engage in this behavior type of thing.
Cool.
Okay.
So once I learned the if statement, it all kind of just came together.
Now, AI, are you saying artificial intelligence?
Yes. I don't know if maybe that's not the appropriate word, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Just to make sure our viewers know it. AI
Yes.
is artificial intelligence here.
Gotcha.
So that's
Cary, I'm always interested in kind of the business side of this. And how do you go from a guy who's in his dorm room, or is going to college full time, who probably isn't knee deep in the business world yet, to creating a game, to having it go as viral as it did, as quickly as it did? What were the steps that kind of made that happen from the time you said, okay, I'm going to put this out there, until you're in all these magazines? How'd that happen?
And I want to add something to that question about, did you have a conversation about bringing in lawyers and protecting your intellectual property and worrying about if you could protect your code and all of that kind of stuff?
Okay. So the first part of that, regarding launching it and marketing, is I actually launched it, again, similar to how I built it, where I built it when I was taking an Excel course. I launched it while I was taking a marketing course. So I was applying the principles of that marketing course to the launch. So how to effectively launch a technology product was one of the things in that course that we did, as well as personal branding. So creating the website that then enabled the launch of the product was another thing that we did. So that was that element of it. The intellectual property question, Oz, that you raised, that didn't really cross my mind, largely because I did not release the game with the intention to monetize it. I released it with the intention to gain notoriety so that I could enter the games industry. Right? My goal was to make sure that this game got into the hands of as many people as possible, so that my name would be out there.
it worked. It worked.
Right. And I asked that because, and I wonder if the others of us here have dealt with this, or even people in the audience. You build something in Excel, somebody sees it, and then their eyes light up. You can sell this. You can make millions off of this. Well, it doesn't seem to me to be so easy. And sometimes do we worry too much about intellectual property and trying to protect code, or hey, I'm the nice guy that's giving it away, and then watch somebody on the other side of the world get rich. So all of this stuff goes through at least my mind when somebody comes to me and says, this thing is cool. You should make millions. What are you doing?
True.
True. Any thoughts?
Here.
Millions.
You should make millions.
We should all make millions.
Right.
I have any thoughts on that, Cary?
Well, from a couple thoughts. First, no one gets rich making Excel games. The second thought is that you can't really protect your code in Excel. That is one of the unfortunate realities, because Excel is not actually creating an executable. So even if you password protect your code and all of that, it's still fairly easy to hack that and to unlock that through the use of a hex editor or things of that nature. So that's not necessarily something that you can do easily. That being said, I'm all right with that, given what I'm trying to do with Excel.
So, let's say I'm a new, I want to get into the game industry. So I guess I have two questions. The first is, if someone came to you and said, I want to make a game in Excel because I want to learn game development principles, do you, looking back, think Excel is still a good platform for teaching that? And then the second question would be, Excel aside, what advice would you give to our viewers just about becoming part of the gaming industry?
Those are great questions. The first is regarding Excel in general. For the use of games, I am a heavy advocate for Excel within the game development process. In particular, for prototyping game concepts, it is very easy and very quick to prototype your design in Excel because Excel predefines all of the cells in the range and all of this data, all of this back end you don't have to deal with when you're doing a prototype. And with prototyping, you want to get something out there, as quick and easy as possible, so that way, you're either failing fast or you're iterating quickly, and that way you're, able to design the game that you want to do. So I'm a heavy advocate for Excel's use in game design, particularly the prototyping process. I'm sorry, I completely forgot your other question.
So I'm a smiley kid trying to get into the game industry. What do I do next? Where do I start?
Right.
What advice do you have for me?
So the other one was as far as, I guess, game production. And, I think what's important is keeping scope in check. So one of the benefits of launching Arena.XLSM is the question that you presented actually happens fairly commonly. I do get a lot of people coming to me wanting to make games in Excel and wanting my advice or feedback on their games. And the biggest issue that I come across is people who have, this grandiose design in their head for like a massive game. And the problem with that is, while that might be fun to play, I can assure you it's not fun to build. You want to make sure that your motivation, you can stay motivated, and the best way to do that is to consider things, in very small modular pieces. Like my first goal was just have a moving player. That was it. And I think if my goal was to create Arena.XLSM at the very beginning, I never would have finished it. And the best way to enter the games industry, at the very least, is to finish a game. Finish and release a game, and that illustrates your competence and what you can do.
We've seen a lot of success in folks building things in Excel that have already been built. So like that 2048 game. So that was an iPhone app, and then someone made it in Excel. And I wonder if a good place to start is to look for something kind of simple that's already been done and see what you can recreate in Excel.
Oh yeah, there's been great simple Excel games that were made. Like I think I saw someone made like Snake in Excel, Pac-Man in Excel. Like start simple, or start modular, and then go from there and create your own thing.
So, Cary, can you explain to me kind of what it was like? So, what is the tactical steps that you took whenever you put this game out? So, say somebody's created the next Snake game, right? Or the next they've created stuff that they want to try to get it out there. And as Oz was saying earlier, it's not like everybody's going to make $1 million, but what steps did you take, or what sort of steps would you recommend that people take that you found to be successful for getting a product out there?
Definitely plan the marketing strategy. The if you build it, they will come strategy is not an effective strategy. So, before launching, I had drafted a narrative which tells a compelling story, and that's important to establish why someone wants your product, right? So it's not just, oh, here's what my product can do for you. It can do A, B, C, D. It's, why do you need it? It's very similar to, I don't know if you've seen The Wolf of Wall Street,
Yes.
but at the end, he's telling people to sell him this pen. And the idea there is you're creating the desire rather than talking about the functionality. And when it comes to technology products especially, you want to, you want to be able to appeal to your target audience, your target demographic.
Gotcha. So,
So
go ahead, Oz.
now, if this happened piece by piece over time, at what point do you have some sense of who the market is?
I didn't.
Right.
This started as a pet project for me.
Right.
I didn't expect to release it at all. It was only until, I guess, January when I started taking a marketing course that I was like, okay, you know what, this would be a good time to try to apply these concepts with this product and see what happens.
Right.
Then you need
But yeah.
you need to take an investment course. You need to start planning your life around courses you take, man. This is a good strategy. Huh? I got it all wrong.
I mean, if you do want to read up more, I guess I'll give a plug out to my marketing prof, Marcus Giesler, who writes a lot about introducing products into the technology space, and you can actually get a lot of his published papers, which are surprisingly easy to read, and really do a good job about creating a narrative and crafting that strategy.